going to bring up my website there. No PowerPoint today. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we did at NC State. So, Institute for Advanced Analytics, I'm the founding director of the Institute. The Institute was founded in 2007 from an initiative that began in 2006. And at the cornerstone of the Institute was the creation of the country's first full-fledged master's degree in analytics. And you might, if you were back in 2006 or 7, ask, like, what is analytics? Would have been a good question at the time, but I'll kind of go into that. What I'd like to say, though, right from the start is that universities are complicated places. I've been teaching at universities for almost 30 years. I spent the first half of my career as a faculty member at MIT, and moved to NC State. And I have a deep appreciation for just how difficult it is to get any kind of forward momentum, especially if you're trying to steer the ship in different directions. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. Culture is really important. However, that is extremely difficult to change. So you have to understand your university and think about clever ways about how to move it forward. None of us has a lot of time. Most department heads particularly don't have a lot of time to do that. You might have 5 or 10 years before you move on to something else. So what I'm going to describe is how we created an entirely new degree, and give you some insight into some of the organizational tricks for how we did that at NC State. So to start with, I was very fascinated throughout the 90s as the web emerged at the sort of, when you sort of get behind the screen and understand that it's this huge data flow, and that you had to understand it, model it, make decisions about it. Is this a threat? Is this a customer? If it's a customer, what do we want to do with it? That went beyond maybe what a statistics major would really be able to do or work with, as well as going beyond maybe what a computer science major would do. If you're like NC State, and it's important to remember, again, we're sort of similar, but we're also different in different ways. NC State is not Carnegie Mellon. NC State is not MIT. Many of us who are at public universities are dealing with another level of complication in reinventing curriculum. But there was this sort of a realization by the late 90s, 2000 period, that in fact there's a need to sort of see where people with these skill sets in programming, computer science generally, machine learning and so forth, overlaid well with the need for deeper understanding of statistics. And how do you potentially create that person, but more, how do you create people who can just work together in that process? And so by around 2000, I actually proposed to the faculty that we create a new degree that tried to start to bundle these skills together at the graduate level. Nobody really understood what I was talking about at the time. But 5 years later, they came to me and said, look, no one knows what you're talking about, but come up with a proposal. And so in 2005, I made a proposal to create a new institute as a vehicle for doing this. Now, really there's 3 important things about this. One is that depending on where you are, and Carnegie Mellon's a wonderful place, if you have a faculty who can work together, that's great. It's not unusual, though, to be in universities with faculty across different departments are very territorial about what they do. And so for us, the first really important thing was, let's create an institute that existed outside of the colleges, outside of any particular department, as a kind of level playing field where faculty from any of our 65 departments could come together and participate in the creation of this new graduate degree program. That level playing field was very important. So it was a kind of little trick actually at NC State. We had institutes that existed outside of colleges, and we had institutes that ran degree programs, but we never had an institute outside of college run a degree program. All of our 100 graduate degree programs, although ordained by the graduate school, run out of a particular department, even if they're done jointly with another department. And so the first trick was to play a little loophole in the rule book that said, wow, we have institutes running degree programs, we have institutes outside of colleges, let's have an institute outside of the college running a degree program. So now we're the one and only of 100 graduate degrees at NC State that runs outside of a department or college. Extremely unusual, but a very key part of creating something new and different, where you could get the faculty to come together and work with a shared sense of ownership over what they were creating. So it's not a statistics degree with some computer science faculty participating. We're not a business degree with some statistics faculty. We're not a stat degree with some business and computer science people working together. It's its own thing, and the faculty, as subtle as it is, this notion of shared ownership, that someone else's department doesn't own it, was a key element to this. So little loophole in the rule book enabled us to create this level playing field. The second thing is we decided, let's build the entire thing from scratch. So we didn't turn to the catalog and decide what's the core and what's the elective. And faculty then decided, is my course in or not in, or am I core or am I elective? That's most of the dialogue that frequently goes around when you create new degree programs. Instead, we said, we're building a new degree. Let's do it from the ground up, lecture by lecture. And let's not even think of courses as building blocks. Let's think about the curriculum from actual content knowledge that we felt the students needed to know. And we essentially approached the entire faculty of the university and said, what do you know better than anyone else in the world, or at least on this campus, that you think is relevant to this sort of group of students that we're trying to create? And don't send me your course syllabus. Tell me lecture by lecture, what are you going to teach them? And not a lecture more than goes beyond your expertise. Okay? So got rid of courses in a sense. Now, I say that loosely because there's courses in the catalog that the students have to register for now. But if you come to the Institute and see how we actually deliver the program, the students don't have a sense that they're going from course to course around campus. In fact, they're just coming to school every day, doing their work in the context of courses and outside of courses, and I'll go into that in more detail. But we kind of pushed away the boundaries of courses, which again, helped faculty sort of become closer together in how they interact, as opposed to these course domains, as sort of large, difficult building blocks to work around. Then the third thing we did was we really shifted the locus of attention from the student as the customer, what does the student want to learn, which happens a lot, maybe not at Carnegie Mellon, but at public universities all the time. How do we keep students happy? Usually it ends up by giving them the most electives possible, producing the core. We even have elective core courses at NC State. You can even choose in your core what you're going to take. That's how ridiculous it's become. We shifted that locus of attention of what do the students, what do they want essentially? And very importantly, which is really more the reality, away from what the faculty want. Because in fact, most degree programs are the vanity of the faculty. It's what we want to teach, what we think is important. Don't get me wrong, that's important. But we shifted it, at least momentarily, the focus of attention on the employer. And we didn't ask employers what they want, per se. We tried to understand, what are they looking for when they hire people? We kind of shifted away from student as customer to student as what we produce. And how do we produce that student that employers really want to hire? Okay, so 3 things. Create a level playing field, build something from scratch, which is really rare, too rare. We should be doing a little more of that. We can't do it all the time, but we should do it a little more. And then, what are they really looking for when they hire these new Masters of Science graduates in analytics? And first, the end of the story. Now we run one of NC State's largest graduate degree programs. We'll graduate more people this year, 120. We're running on a 10-month cycle. It's a 10-month master's degree. We'll graduate 120. That's more than the statistics department, all 3 degrees combined. Okay, that's now one of the 3 or 4 largest in terms of degrees conferred. We have the second largest applicant pool, numbering close to 1,300 this year, applicants. We have the single largest domestic applicant pool. And in fact, our domestic applicant pool is larger than the next 10 largest programs' domestic applicant pools, all engineering combined. Okay, we're talking about a huge domestic applicant pool for the program because it has a tremendous ROI. They are also NC State's most sought after graduate, highest paid, most job offers, essentially all employed by graduation. In fact, if you go to our website, you can download a 12-page employment report which gives you every detail of their employment. If we benchmark them, they're actually doing as well, if not better, than graduates of MIT or Carnegie Mellon. And this is an ordinary public university. It's good, but it's an ordinary public university. Okay. Some would say we're not the best public university in North Carolina. I disagree with that. I don't know who's in the audience, I have to be careful. But, you know, in the scheme of things, we're producing the university's most sought after graduate on par with graduates out of the best universities in the country, if measured by salary levels, offers by graduation, employment, things of this sort. So first, I think it starts with recognizing that we didn't try to create a new discipline. So we didn't try to define analytics as a new field. Statistics, we love statisticians, right? They're an important part of this equation. We equally love computer scientists and applied mathematicians and a whole bunch of other people who came together from the university to help develop this curriculum. We didn't try to invent a new field or discipline, which is really like our default behavior. We're trying to invent a new discipline. That's sort of like the rabbit hole data science is falling down. To us, data scientist is just a job category. It's not an academic discipline. If anything, on our campus, it's an attempt by the computer science faculty to sort of move into a new territory that overlaps with statistics at some level. Okay, so it's a more geopolitical term on the campus. For us, it's just a job label, and it's not going to go away. As much as I dislike it, it's not going to go away. It's actually a pretty bad label in industry, because it's not really all about the data, and they're not really scientists. You know? But I understand why analyst wasn't a good label for folks, how it had to go away, and how it was really a combination of skills that went beyond statistician, that industry sort of, and once it came out, now you have people entering, you have people in grade school aspiring to become data scientists. That's not going to change. And so it's okay that it's there and it's wonderful. But I'm not interested in creating a discipline around data science. In fact, the Master of Science in Analytics is not a new discipline. It's not something separate from statistics or computer science or anything else. But it really is more akin to, or analogous to, is professional business education. So in a business school, I was at the Sloan School for a number of years, business school is a bundle of skills, some statistics, some finance, some bunch of other things together. And what we try to do with this Master of Science in Analytics is really the same thing. Take some very important skills and bundle them together in what was really essentially a new professional degree, as opposed to a prelude to somebody's doctorate somewhere. Okay, so think of it in a different sort of way. So the last part of this sort of 3 steps was the employer. And what we discovered when we tried to understand what do employers want, I thought I would do something really cool. So I would, this is back in 2005-06, download like 1,000 job descriptions for the kind of jobs I thought these students would go into. And then I would do some clever text mining. And I discovered the secret of what employers want. In reality, there's no secret at all. If you read even just a dozen job descriptions, you discover real fast what employers are looking for. Interestingly, if you're like me as a professor, I'd actually never read a job description that wasn't for a professor. Our job descriptions are completely different than the job descriptions our students actually are applying to for jobs. And if you read even just a few dozen job descriptions, at that time, what sort of occurred to me is like, you know, employers, well, of course there's some kind of technical skill set, you know, forecasting, data mining, you know, some technical skill that may be the core of the job, but it's not everything. And that's really a challenge to the faculty, because frequently our degrees, the technical skill is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's 10 courses of technical skill. But when you look at what employers want, they actually want a bundle of things. And in fact, they're not even looking for someone who knows everything technically. In fact, that might be a red flag for an employer. They want someone who knows something, but also knows how to continue to learn, and that they don't know everything. They need to know to sort of engage in a particular job. What's interesting is equally important, and I underscore equally important, are other things. And those other things include things like teamwork skills. Teamwork is essential in the workplace. Carnegie Mellon is a beautiful place. You have people working together. I love the big heart. But actually, in a lot of universities, it's not that way at all. In fact, you get to be, you know, at the top ranks of the university by simply outrunning everybody else, publishing more, raising more money. It's a thoroughbreding process. Nobody ever got tenure, I dare say, at NC State, because the faculty said they're such a wonderful team player. We really have to put that at the top of the list. It'll never happen. They simply raised more money, published more. That's how they got to where they were. In industry, everything is about teams. That's really, in fact, it's very unusual to see a job description that says something to the effect that no need to work with other people. Social dysfunction, okay. I think maybe in some areas where it's so hard to hire people. I saw somebody sent me a job description that said, you know, they have like kind of a you know, easy term for it, something like lone contributor okay or something, something like this, which is a pseudonym for like, yeah, if you only want to work by yourself, it's okay, you know, we'll let you do that. But that's extremely rare. Virtually, you know, teamwork is prized by employers, absolutely prized, and they'll use a kind of language for it. They'll say, we're looking for cultural fit. We're looking for fit in the position, which is really what they're saying is we look for someone who's going to be able to work on our team and work with other people in here. We produce now, 10 years later, you know, NC State's most sought after graduate, our brand is about producing the best team players you're going to find who understand these skill sets. Employers will come from all over the country to hire these students because they're so well configured as team players in this, and I'll talk a little bit about how we do that. Communication skills. So everybody's heard that. You could go through 4 years of NC State in applied mathematics or statistics without ever saying a word about those things in any meaningful sense. You're just in lectures, you know, for 4 years. You take tests, and that's the end of it. Statistics, I have to give some credit. They now have maybe in the senior year a project course where they have to sort of work together. Computer science is similar at some level. So things are changing, which is wonderful. But you really don't have to talk much about stuff to get through 4 years of higher education at quite a lot of universities in the United States. You can talk all the time at tailgates, but you know, actually talking about math or statistics or computer science is a little different because they tend to be a little bit more. It's interesting how not only do universities have cultures, but different departments have different cultures as well. You can see that very clearly. But the communication skill, the bar is much higher than people think, because it's about communicating some very complicated, the results of some very sort of complicated work that's largely black box to, potentially black box to a decision maker. And so the level of ability to communicate in ways that someone can understand and trust that what you've done is accurate, valuable, useful, something I can make $1 million decision about is really a high level of communication skill. So I think it goes beyond. We tend to, in curricula, we tend to take what I call sort of the super glue and duct tape approach to those kinds of soft skills. I'd never used that term, but now you all know what I mean, right? But we tend to sort of duct tape and super glue it on the end of curricula. It has to be a much more integral part. They have to talk more, they have to write more, they have to do things in an interactive way. The other thing is tool skills. You know, every job description is an alphabet soup of programming skills. And so actually working and having programming knowledge is an important part of this field. And it can be any of a number of tools. I would talk about it as not a specific tool, but as a toolbox. The ability to actually adapt quickly to any situation and work whatever programming tools are being used in that environment. I should say, in addition to being the founding director of this institute, I'm now the good night director. Some of you, there's not a good morning director. Like the good night director is James Goodnight, founder of SAS. So we use a fair amount of SAS, but we use other things as well, because in this environment, you're using all kinds of tools, whether it's R, SAS, other programming languages. The last thing is that employers are really, so it's sort of like technical skill, teamwork, communication, tools, and finally, these employers are really looking for someone who isn't obsessed with data, but interested in moving their organization forward, that they have contextual understanding. They know that we're, what we do as a business, whether we're a bank, an insurance company, a retailer, a digital pure play like Google. And I will underscore, every time data science is mentioned in a popular way, quickly thereafter, Google, Facebook, Twitter. If you looked at our employment report, you would see with 120 students graduating now, we'll have several hundred employers attempting to hire them. Google, Facebook, they don't really need to worry too much. They get tens of thousands of applications. They have people knocking at their door all the time. There are hundreds and hundreds of organizations, probably in your backyards, who need people with these skills, and you should focus on them. Don't try to produce the person that Google wants, because that's going to send you awry. You need to understand that your employer set, the people around you, the people who are likely to hire your students, understand what their needs are, and start to produce the people who are most likely to fit with their organizations. We took those 5 things, and then we literally built a curriculum from scratch, lecture by lecture, sort of threading these lecture streams together. Instead of the course building blocks, which are very clunky, we created a kind of a threaded curriculum where elements, from linear algebra to, all the parts of statistics that we felt were important, all the parts of programming and computer science that we felt were important, as well as domain knowledge area, whether it's marketing, science, or finance, or other areas. We threaded the faculty together. They don't actually teach full courses. It's a very unusual situation. What we did is we found that, everybody sort of is on default mode, three credit hour courses if you're in a credit hour model. We found that, in fact, courses could be any number of credit hours. I was smart enough not to propose a single 30 credit hour course, this is very messy data. It's not sort of more traditional experimental data. It's the exhaust data that flows out of various kinds of organizations, building models, preparing an executive level report and presentation, not an academic report and presentation at the end. That practicum spans 8 up to 10 months. We do an open solicitation. Ask any in the world, you have a problem set of objectives in which you're willing to share anything from a few gigabytes to a few terabytes of data under confidentiality agreement. We'll put a team of students on it. In addition, everything the team produces is the property of the sponsor. There's no sort of joint IP agreement between us and the sponsor, between the university and the sponsor, and we don't charge a fee. We typically now get about 60 to 70 proposals a year, of which we can do 24 through the curriculum. So we get proposals from everything from sports clubs to secret agencies. We work with some of the world's largest brands, doing very sophisticated, challenging, interesting problems at the core of the curriculum, in which we then thread in things like teamwork building skills and all the other things that you really need to be able to function. It has a very elaborate teaming structure to the curriculum, where they're not just working in teams, but we're also evaluating them in teams in fairly short order, and then giving them individualized feedback on how to improve their teamwork skills. So a very elaborate teamwork structure, very elaborate communication skills building, not add-ons, but an integral part of the curriculum where they're doing these things together. They're working their technical skills while they're working in teams. They're communicating stuff all the way through. So it's much more holistic than sort of going through a menu of core and elective courses that ends up producing a student who is really quite remarkable on hand. I can't tell you, it's unbelievable. We're bringing in wonderful, wonderful students now. We're highly selective. We have NC State's lowest acceptance rate by far, under 13% now the last 3 years running alone in this process. So very selective. But these students really, things happen during this curriculum that make them very attractive to employers at the end. So it shouldn't really be any surprise. You really try to understand what employers are trying to hire to, and then you build a learning experience that yields those results, and then all of a sudden the employers really want to hire them. That's essentially what happened to us. It's very exciting, very interesting, very different. It's not going to work everywhere because institutions are different, they have different cultures, but there's certainly something to learn from this kind of experience in terms of inventing something new that addresses a need. Don't worry about what you call it, worry about what it is that what kind of product you're actually trying to produce at the end for employers. So that's sort of in a nutshell what it is. I'd be very happy to answer any questions now, but I certainly invite you to take a closer look. Certainly welcome to your own to come to NC State if you'd like to learn more or see the curriculum up close. But I can tell you, it's really, the net result of it is we're getting amazing students. And of course, as faculty, that's what we want. We want to be very selective, to get these young, bright people, super motivated and talented, wherever we might be. And then to see the value that's created in them. You know, we're talking about 23, 24, 25 years. Although our students range in age from their early 20s to their early 50s, we're seeing people in their early 20s earning, you know, more than our faculty are earning, which is astronomical, getting an incredible ROI on their education, which is absolutely amazing to see. And at the same time, the faculty actually love the curriculum. What's not to love? You know, they're just teaching what they love most for not a single week longer than they need to, with the best students that they could find, without actual final course ownership responsibility, which means they never have to discuss grades with students at all. They evaluate them any way they want, but they don't have final course grade responsibility, which alleviates a lot of that static between professors and students about why did I get this here? That's going to be on the exam, that sort of thing. Happy to take any questions about it. I know it's kind of gone fast through this, but yes.
Do you have a mix of domestic and international students? How's the domestic students?
So we have 90% of our students are domestic.
Wow.
Yes,
Whoa.
yes. And the reason is because this has an amazing array. They all pay tuition, no scholarships, all fully paid, and actually a premium tuition. Although as a public school, it wouldn't necessarily be Carnegie Mellon or MIT level tuition, but most of them borrow to come in because they will get the ROI for the program is if you say, okay, they're out of the workforce for 1 year, take 1 year of wages, add to it tuition. How long does it take, based on the differential in income they'll be earning, to earn back that year of lost wages and tuition? It takes our students less than 24 months to pay back a year of lost wages and the tuition, whether they're in-state or out of state. So with that kind of ROI, a lot of people say like there aren't domestic students who, want to get higher education. There are, but they need a real ROI in order to do it. And as a result, we're getting, like I said, we have the university's largest domestic applicant pool. Our domestic applicant pool is larger than the entire array of engineering graduate programs combined, at the master's level. I don't know about the PhD. That's how significant it is. And we're getting them from all across the country. About half from North Carolina, but from all over the country. Really, really solid students. I will say one thing. We don't require a GRE or a GMAT score. We have no standardized attempt. We review applications at the transcript level, make sure that it has courses in various areas of math and statistics and programming that we want to see how well they did in it. And then we interview every candidate for admission, which is very rare. Panel interview, 4 or 5 faculty and staff members, 30 minutes. This year, we have 120 students that just started this summer. We started with close to 1,300 applications. We interviewed 350 people, most of them in person. They'll come to the Institute, fly to the Institute for their interviews. We offered admission to 147 to enroll 120 people. That's an enrollment rate. Our enrollment rate is typically 80 to 90%. Over the top. I mean, nothing comes close to that, like, period. It's really something to see. There's a question over here and then there.
What difference do you see between business analytics and data science?
I want to sit down and analyze that this summer very carefully because, anecdotally, I don't really see any difference. So the analytics, we admitted our first students in 2007. Our first class graduated in 2008. That was almost 5 years before the next program in analytics, whether it's business analytics or analytics generally or data analytics. It was another 2 or 3 years before data science emerged. And data science really, it seems more about where it's positioned in the university than from a content point of view and different than what's going on in the analytics degree programs. But I actually want to analyze that very carefully because there's now 100 plus programs, about 60 to 70 analytics programs. If it says business analytics, it's largely because it's in the business school. If it just says analytics or has some other adjective, it's likely to be in some other part of the university or like us running independently of any department or college. And then there's about 25 or so data science master's degrees that have come online in the last 3-ish years or so. But I don't think, I think what I'll discover is that there's really not any difference beyond where it's actually housed in the university. Not too different from a content point of view. Basically say who's going to teach the teamwork course? We coursify everything. That's how we think. And so we did not do that. Instead, what we did is we said, you know what? Let's run this entire curriculum in a team-driven format. So the students are always working in teams. Now, the practicum team I talked about is like an 8-month team, but they're also in a kind of study group team that changes its membership every 6 weeks through the curriculum. But it's not about just putting students in teams. We also measure their performance extensively in teams. They peer evaluate across the teams. We can share with you the peer evaluation metrics that we use. And then, but this is the critical part, we do that every 6 weeks, 20 scored items, extensive written comments. Then we give them feedback on their self-evaluation relative to how their teams are evaluating them. And then they're sitting down with a coach and sort of going over like what happened the last 6 weeks, good or bad, and then what are we going to do in the next 6 weeks to get better. So it's that coaching element of the teamwork skill that becomes a critical element in them really changing their behavior to understanding that I've got to get in this team and really make it work, no matter who I'm with in this context. What's interesting in the dynamic is they're on one team for a long period of time. They have the same people evaluating them over and over again, but they're on another team with changing membership over time. Now, I'll tell you what's interesting about this, and now 10 classes that we've done, is students are getting much better at teamwork. It's really starting to pervade education a little bit further. But what you really have is you'll have some students who they get together in a room and they feel like they could do this better themselves. You know, they're the smartest student in the room. You know, these other people are holding me back. And they've got to learn that that may be true. They are the smartest person in the room. But they've got to work with other people, and that the team dynamic becomes very, very important. And for some students, they adapt very quickly to the team environment, but other students will be have a very difficult time in the front end. And what's interesting is that because they're being evaluated by lots of people over a relatively short period of time, their first response is always like, it's not me, it's them. But after 30 people evaluate you, you sort of, because if you're good with data, you're like, okay, maybe it's me. And now I've got to do something different, you know. And again, it's not an add-on in the curriculum. You will not get the degree unless you can actually function in a team environment. Like you can sink yourself through this process. And so it's not an add-on, it's a kind of integral part of the learning experience, doing the teamwork, the communication, and it's taken equally seriously.
Can I follow up just real quick on that?
Yeah.
So this is a very labor-intensive evaluation process.
Yeah.
And you've just told us that you have people involved for very short periods of time in not doing this. So what's the overhead of sort of the continuing staff that's doing kind of the care and feeding for the groups over the course?
Yeah, so you can see, you'll be able to see the faculty and staff at the Institute. And so we're actually a very staff-forward program. So interestingly, we use faculty like the experts they are. Like, you know, they focus on sharing their expertise with the students. They have a rich interaction with them, but we don't labor them with administrivia or other things. We're a very staff-forward program, and we have people who are trained in professional coaching to be able to sit down with the students and do it. Now, I should say, they all pay tuition. It's a very profitable program. It's incredible. There's actually money in higher education, folks. It's unbelievable. I have all the money we need. I'm not even sending you a bill for this trip. I don't have to do that. I can travel anywhere I want, anytime. I can send my faculty anywhere I want, anytime. We send the students anywhere we want, anytime. I mean, there's actually it's a very efficient model. Now remember, I'm teaching 10 months, 40 credit hours, fully cohorted curriculum from beginning to end. So there's not like 20 electives and lots of other random things. This is like the most efficient delivery mechanism you can have. Every one of those seats are filled, 120 students, all paying tuition. It's generating millions of dollars in revenues, of which we capture because we're a kind of self-contained business model. It doesn't sort of disappear into the university.
Where do you get these staff people? Are they fully employed as instructors?
Yeah,
they're they extra,
well,
like this is an extra job for them? They're business people?
No, we've hired people into the Institute and sort of have them as sort of coordinators. And you'll see various job titles, I don't know what we say, but they're deployed as coaches interacting with the students. And we have enough people where the students, there's enough variety of people where students can interact at a coaching level where they're comfortable as well. But this is the kind of thing where if you came to visit, you'd see up closely how we do it. But there's about 18 full-time faculty and staff within the Institute, and then we draw some additional faculty on a sort of out-of-load basis from other parts of the university. But the coaches are people who have some training in how to coach people, which I don't have, so I don't do, in that process. Yeah.
So how do you get the faculty to participate, and how do they complement that with their regular faculty?
Yeah, so what was interesting was in the beginning, it was all faculty who had other responsibilities. And so, but what I said is like, okay, what do you know that these students need to know? Tell me what it is. 5 lectures, 10 lectures. We paid faculty out of load because there was no real prep time for them. It was their core expertise. But as we got bigger, we actually had to pull in full-time faculty to work within the institute. 120 students on a 10-month cycle. So we're teaching multiple, sections, 40 students, 60 student sections, and so forth. So now you'll see we have our own staff. We have a PhD in statistics, a PhD in applied mathematics, a PhD in computer science, and so forth that are full-time with the institute. And we still pull in some expertise from the university. But in the beginning, it was all pulling in faculty from various departments in sort of very quantized way that enabled us to pay them out of load because they didn't have to buy themselves out of their other courses. They weren't teaching a course within the institute. So that was the trick, if you will. And of course, 2007 to 2008, the recession hit. And I was actually paying good money to faculty to do that out of load. Didn't have to travel anywhere. So when I started, the department head said, you'll never get anyone to do this. In fact, I had a long line of faculty who wanted to participate in the curriculum because salaries weren't going up anymore. And I wasn't removing them from their course responsibility in the department.
Maybe we just have one more question from Andrew over here who's been trying to jump in.
Okay, sorry.
And then we're-
So, firstly, when I was in industry and we were hiring people in the areas of analytics and decision support, the recruiters put the NSA resumes in the top priority stack. They were really good. And they tended to get through pretty rigorous interviews very well. So we were grateful that we made that.
Hey, cool. Well, thank you.
One of the things which I think it's boring but important to a lot of us in this room is how is the politics in the whole university? Because where there's wealth, you do start to get stress, and you might start to see someone say, well, he's doing this, I'm going to do a profitable master's in data science or master's
Well,
in...
no, absolutely. That is the challenge. And in fact, it is occurring. I think on most campuses now you have these sort of groups sort of jockeying for position. And even though we're the dominant player and it's well recognized on campus, and they understand that we're in a position that's really hard to beat, still there is some of that jockeying because people sense that there's money in it. Usually what I do is I invite them in to show them what I do, and then they walk away thinking like, oh, we're never going to do that. That's just too hard to do. And it seems hard to the average faculty member, but when you're well organized, so that's part of the message of this, is like you can't really change culture, but you can actually reorganize to do things more productively. And that's really the experiment that this institute is. It's a different organizational mechanism for creating and delivering a degree program. But that tension is now there. When we started, there was no tension because people said, this guy's proposing to create a new master's degree in a year, and he doesn't have a single course in the catalog. Like, how in the world is he going to do it? So it was like a little jujutsu kind of thing, like it'll never work. That's why it got approved. Like people said, like, there's no way that will ever work. And then it was like, it worked from the first year. But universities have a kind of slow tick-tock to them, and most people didn't wake up again and look until about year 3 or 4. When the recession hit, hiring became very difficult on a campus like NC State. Many students went unemployed from graduation. That was a common phenomenon. Our students were flying off the shelf all through the recession. So by 2010, 11, the university's like, what in the world is going on here? This is weird. He's producing these students in 10 months. They're actually paying tuition and they're getting 3 or 4 job offers. But I can't deny there is this sort of still political dynamic. We're kind of an innovation, it's sort of like the organism, wanting to reject the mutation or something that goes on. I don't know enough about the biology, but I know that there's that pressure there. But we're such a dominant force now, it's hard to get rid of us at this point, or for it to fall apart. But we may see on our own campus someone, like the computer science department launched their own Master of Science in Data Science. And I think the only thing that is getting them hitting the pause button is like, we may embarrass ourselves. Like, you know, we may be thinking we're going to get in good on something, but if we don't do it well, and this is setting a really high bar, then we might have egg on our face in this process. That's sort of slowing them down a little bit. But I don't fight it. So, you know, that's the other thing. Like, there's a wonderful saying, you know, if you stop to engage every barking dog, you'd never get anything done. Like, most of the time, I'm ignoring, you know, the rest of those politics. I don't engage. I don't try to fight. I don't try to be territorial. I just try to run faster and be better than anyone else. The only thing a university really can't kill is an educational program where everyone pays for tuition. Never going to happen, you know. So, you know, if you don't engage in my position is don't engage in the politics. Just produce something that's, you know, on par with the best. You know, that's the thing. That's the other thing. I think, you know, the wonderful thing about this. Again, we're an ordinary public university. If I could do this, anyone here can do this. You just have to have the willpower to want to do it, you know, and invest the time and effort to do it. But, you know, we've demonstrated that this can be done. And we have a benefactor, but the benefactor was a very modest gift up front. It wasn't enormous sums of money or anything, so don't get the wrong idea. It was enough to be able to incentivize faculty to engage them in those early years. But it's a model that generates enough revenue to be sustainable on its own.